and welcome to Scotland's Singing for Health podcast, produced by Scotland's Singing for Health Network and funded by the Royal Society of Edinburgh. I'm Sophie Boyd, and today I'm joined by two brilliant guests. Before they're introduced, let me tell you a little bit about this podcast and why we are talking about Singing for Health. Singing for Health groups support the management of a range of conditions, such as respiratory conditions, dementia, Parkinson's disease, and mental health concerns. In each episode of the podcast, we will be talking to singers, singing group leaders, researchers, and medical practitioners to find out more about the benefits of singing and what Singing for Health activities are taking place all around Scotland. So, hello, Cheyne and Caro. Thank you so much for joining me.
Hello.
Hello.
Cheyne and Caro, it's brilliant to have you here with us today. Really looking forward to chatting with you. You are both doing some really fascinating work in singing and lung health. So I wonder if we might start, if you could tell our listeners a little bit about your background in this field and the work that you're up to at the moment.
Okay, shall I start? So it's lovely to be here and thanks for inviting me. So my name's Jane Lewis and I'm a community song leader with the Warblers Singing for Lung Health group. I trained in Singing for Lung Health with the British Lung Foundation back in 2015. It was actually the pilot round of their training for existing song leaders and in working with people with lung conditions. And I set up a Singing for Lung Health group in East Lothian in 2015, followed by an additional group in Midlothian in 2016.
And I'm Caro Overy, and thank you very much for inviting me today. I'm a singing leader with the Cheyne Gang, which is a singing for breathing charity, and I trained in 2017 as part of their pilot training. I then started leading the Leith group for the Cheyne Gang in 2018, and we're one of 6 different groups around Scotland that are all part of the Cheyne Gang. So yeah, that's me.
Oh, it's so great to have you both here. I'm really excited to share experiences about being singing leaders in this field. For the listeners who don't know, I run a singing group, Cheyne Gang singing group in Glasgow, in the East End in Denniston, which I started as a research project in 2018. So yeah, it's so nice to talk about this with you. I guess we should start off by explaining to our listeners what Singing for Lung Health actually is.
I've actually, when I was preparing for this podcast, I looked up to refresh my memory of a great resource, which is called Singing for Lung Health, a systematic review of the literature and consensus statement, which was published online in December 2016. In NPJ Primary Care Respiratory Medicine. So you can find that online. And the definition of Singing for Lung Health there says that singing for lung health can be distinguished from participation in more generic singing activities by its focus on improving breath control and posture in relation to respiratory disease, using songs as tools for this purpose. These take precedence over the quality of singing produced and preparation for public performance, although efforts to improve the quality of singing provide an important impetus for ongoing participation. Singing for Lung Health groups include specific components around posture and breath control tailored to lung disease, in particular airflow obstruction. Cough is a common feature of respiratory disease and may limit participation in a conventional choir, whereas Singing for Lung Health groups represent a more tolerant environment. So that just, for me, really sums up those essential elements and what it is about a Singing for Lung Health group that is different, albeit containing many similar elements to a conventional community choir or community singing group.
Yeah, definitely. That sums it up so well, all these different elements. Lung health's quite a broad term, I think. what kind of conditions do you see people coming to your groups with?
Within the Cheyne Gang, we have a particular interest in people living with COPD, which is chronic obstructive pulmonary disorder. And when the Cheyne Gang initially started, it was founded by 2 respiratory nurses who were aware of the benefits that singing might bring to some of their patients that they were working with. And so they began as kind of studying and trying out these different techniques that they had. So within the Cheyne Gang, traditionally it was kind of people living with COPD. But increasingly over the years, that's kind of expanded slightly. So now we very much see it as a sort of holistic, anyone who feels that they have a challenge when it comes to breathing or experience breathing difficulties. So we see people with bronchiectasis. We also see those with asthma as well. And also more recently, sometimes people who are managing anxiety and kind of mental health related conditions and the way that that can feed into their breathing. However, our techniques were very much based on that initial work that was done with people living with COPD, which is quite a sort of specific condition when it comes to the lungs and the impact it has on people's experience of breath and breathing.
Thanks, Caro. I think what I'd add to that is that typically singing for lung health groups, yes, historically have focused more and been more geared towards people with COPD, which comprises, is made up of emphysema and chronic bronchitis. Those are the 2 sort of main conditions, and that's known as an obstructive lung condition. So COPD, asthma, and bronchiectasis, and the focus there is on the exhale. So people typically have inflammation and swelling in their airways, which become narrower or maybe even blocked, leaving too much air left in the lungs. And that can result in shortness of breath as a result of that. We also work with people with restrictive lung conditions. So that's an example of that would be pulmonary fibrosis or people who've had lung cancer surgery. And there the focus is a little bit more on the inhale, so making sure there's enough time for the inhale. And I think, Sophie, you'll probably be able to tell me more about this, but I think there have been a few studies done in this area, but much less research. So it's a little bit of a sort of less evidence base that we're working on there, but the focus is more there on the inhale. So we tend to gear our sessions. I always ask people before they come to my groups if they're happy to tell me what their lung condition is, so I can then sort of tailor the approach towards them. The other area to mention is people who are breathless due to long COVID. And there's been a lot of debate around this in the Singing for Lung Health community. Are traditional Singing for Lung Health methods useful or not for people with long COVID? And I think the jury is still out on that one. I was fortunate enough to run one of 5 groups that was running online singing groups for people with long COVID through St Andrew's Voices earlier this year. And these were very small sort of groups, very going at a much gentler pace than we would typically go in our Singing for Lung Health groups, and very much tailored around the needs of people with long COVID, and as much about relaxation and body awareness as they were about breathing and singing. So I think we can maybe adapt some of our sessions, but with caution, and knowing that many people with long COVID have chronic fatigue, and pushing through that absolutely isn't useful.
Yeah, I just to echo what Jane's saying there, and to share some experience from with the Cheyne Gang, we had a collaborative project with Chest, Heart and Stroke Scotland, for which we produced a couple of video resources for people with long COVID. And my understanding at that point was that with long COVID, it was more about supporting participants to regulate their breath. So rather than focusing, like Jane was saying, on the out breath, which is generally what we're doing with obstructive conditions. There's something more to do with that kind of regulating the breathing. So there's a technique that is sometimes called window breathing, where you breathe out for 4 beats, then breathe in, or allow yourself the time of 4 beats to then take a breath in, allow yourself the time of 4 beats to take a breath out, to kind of keep that ebb and flow being the same length. Whereas traditionally when you're working with people with COPD, these obstructive lung conditions, actually want to emphasize the out breath needs to be longer, because by the nature of their conditions, they often have more air in the lungs that they're starting with. So that's kind of one difference in the approach. But I think, as Jane says, we're still learning about that area, and there's so much that we have to consider when it comes to the other symptoms of COVID. Like Jane says, around kind of chronic fatigue, there might be just other things that people are kind of living with, and because it's a new area for everyone, there's just we just don't know what. At the moment we're still learning.
Yes, we're getting quite technical already, aren't we? Which is really interesting, because there's one of the other techniques that we used in that group that I've now brought into my Singing for Lung Health group was actually as we do a breathing exercise, putting the back of a hand sort of on the throat and larynx area, and really focusing on relaxing here. So as you let the air in, just checking that you're leading from the belly and not developing tension here, which is a really useful exercise, actually, that for all of us, to have that sort of feedback mechanism. But yes, I'm hoping that, and the singing groups certainly did bring some benefits to people, that they were a real joy to take part in and be alongside people in their journey. But how that fits with the traditional Singing for Lung Health, it's quite different in terms of pacing.
It's interesting what you're saying about how you're using your breath when you're singing. And it's thinking about how when you sing and you breathe, it's your whole body being used. And I think the singing comes in as a really interesting intervention, because it's about paying attention and acknowledging all these different experiences of breath, kind of repurposing breath into something that's actually bringing so much joy in the group. When your breath is converted into song and laughter and all that connection between people in that space, it's just amazing that singing, I think more than any other intervention, like pulmonary rehab, for example, just really helping people, learn a new relationship with their breath and their body, and finding what they are capable of doing instead of the things that are really, really difficult because of that illness.
Yeah, there's definitely a strand there when we're working with people with COPD, like you say, Sophie. A lot of the experiences of people living with conditions where they need to manage their breath day to day, it can be a really isolating experience. So some of the stories we hear from some of our members where, they're unwilling to phone their friends or relatives in case they need to cough in the middle of a conversation, or they might be unsure about how far they're going to be able to walk before they run out of breath or need to stop and recover. And these things can be we quite often see a coexistence of COPD or another kind of obstructive lung condition with mental health concerns, or people with negative experiences of mental health, because of that kind of relationship, that it becomes a negative relationship with the breath. And within the Cheyne Gang, we talk about trying to create and encourage a positive relationship with the breath. And that's kind of part of what we're doing. And it can definitely come, I think one of the strengths of Singing for Breathing and Singing for Lung Health, with Jane's group and approach as well, is very much about bringing people together with others that have similar experience to themselves, but they're not directly discussing that experience and they're not focusing on the negatives. They're together, kind of building that community and sharing their experiences, but through a positive and kind of fun way of dealing with things. So yeah, I think that's something that we can, a value that I think we bring quite uniquely within singing. And yeah,
it's giving people a voice, literally, to be able to express themselves and let out these emotions together in that safe space. But yeah, without the sort of difficulties of discussing a condition with each other. I actually have the statistics for mental health conditions and COPD from the National Institute of Clinical Excellence. COPD guidelines estimate that 40% of people with COPD live with depression and 36% of people live with anxiety. And that's tied up with feelings of morbidity and from decreased mobility. A lot of people get really isolated in their homes because the fear of getting breathless while out and about is so terrifying. But then the fear of being stuck inside alone is really isolating. And so it's this cycle.
It becomes a vicious cycle that people get caught up in. And then the more anxiety leads to tension in the body, which is why we work so much with the body in Singing for Lung Health, and enable people to become a phrase that we call and that fully embodied, so that we're really inhabiting this body. And that enables us to become more aware of, oh, actually, my shoulders are feeling a wee bit tense. So I can notice that and become aware of it and softening. I love that word, soften. I just think it's so important that actually when we're being gentle and kind to ourselves, we can soften in the body. And once we're aware of our body and how different parts of the body feel and how we inhabit this body, then we can consciously soften. And we can hold our body in a way that we know is more beneficial and that's going to help us breathe in the most efficient way possible. So we do focus quite a bit on body awareness and also postural awareness. This word posture often makes people think about being very stiff, but it's actually not. It's about just, checking in. It's about actually letting your bones do what they need to do to support the body. So we're not sort of slumping down, making the muscles do that work. So those muscles aren't available to us for breathing. So I'm sure we'll come onto this in the wee while, but at the beginning of a session, I'll often start with helping people ground. So really focusing on the feet. And really feeling the contact with the earth, maybe swaying a bit from side to side, lifting the toes, spreading them out, see if you can place them one by one, just really grounding down, and then kind of growing up from that, imagining a cord coming out the crown of the head. So long back and long neck and everything else in between quite nicely relaxed, and shoulders up to ears and back and down, and then pausing and noticing, because it's in that sort of pausing and noticing that we develop the body awareness, and it stops being just an exercise that Jane tells us to do at the beginning of every session. It actually becomes people start noticing themselves, which is what we're wanting them to do. Singing for Lung Health is at its best a tool for helping people to manage their breathlessness and their long-term condition. So we're hoping that people will take these approaches away. And I'm most delighted when we do an evaluation and people say, oh, now when I get a bit breathless, I use some of those exercises when I'm out and about. And I think, yes, job done. It's fabulous that they've actually got the confidence to use these tools and put them into place. And when you feel anxious, then you get much you typically become tense in the upper part of the body, and that then restricts your breathing, and your breathing becomes shallower. So we work with that in that whole field of becoming embodied, becoming aware, knowing how to calm ourselves down, and using the primary, what we call the sort of primary muscles for breathing, rather than the secondary, less efficient muscles.
Oh, thank you so much, Jane. It's really interesting to hear about that embodied practice that you put into place in your sessions.
I was just going to add, actually, that I'm just showing up here a lovely little book called Breathing into Life by Bija Bennett. And it's a book of poems about the breath. And you were talking a while back, Sophie, about developing a more positive relationship with the breath. I use poems quite a lot in our sessions, and I did that a lot in the long COVID singing group. I would end each session with a poem. I'm also a mindfulness teacher, and we use poetry a lot in the mindfulness sessions. This is a book that Feeney Cave, who trained me and has trained many Singing for Lung Health song leaders across the UK and beyond. She recommended this, and it's got lovely little poems about breath. But I also find others that aren't necessarily about breath, might be about the theme of the songs we're singing about, but have got that sort of uplifting general well-being sense about them, and tend to sort of drop them in at the end of the session, say after we've done a wee bit of relaxation or so.
I think that's also one of the unique things about singing, is that, of course, when we're singing, it's got words, and we can find that kind of meaning and the connection in words that support what we're trying to do as well. I mean, I would say with the Cheyne Gang, definitely we try and do a really broad range of songs. So we will definitely do some that are more sort of, could be from anywhere, that are more connected with kind of what we're trying to achieve, the sort of poetry and words that Jane is describing there, where we're sort of thinking about songs that reflect those meanings. But we also do quite a lot of well-known songs, so that the group can easily pick them up, that they enjoy them, and that it's a fun experience for them. Because I'm pretty sure that Jane, like myself, comes from a natural voice background. So within the Natural Voice Network, as natural voice practitioners, we believe fully that everyone can sing, and that singing is everyone's birthright. And that is something that is kind of links in with singing for lung health and singing for breathing really well, because it enables you to kind of support anyone, regardless of their previous musical experience. They're going to have a good time. And hopefully they'll find a song that they enjoy within that.
Yes. And interestingly, I think one of the biggest barriers that we face as singing for lung health practitioners is actually directly related to that, Caro, as well, because it's that belief that I can't sing. And however much we tell people, yes, you can, everybody can sing, come and give it a go, it remains, I think, our biggest barrier, that there's a lot of people out there in the population who don't sing or haven't sung since school, or had a negative experience of singing at school, told they needed to sing at the back, just mouth, whatever it is. We know there's just so much baggage that people have around singing. And when you add in breathlessness on top of that, and living with a chronic lung condition, it's actually quite a challenge to convince people, yes, we would love to have you in our group. You do not need to have any previous experience. Please come along and give it a go. And we will be super supportive of you giving it a go. And it's that giving it a go that's important. And we've got a little video on our website. I think the Cheyne Gang's got something similar, with stories and interviews with people from the group who are saying exactly that. If you believe you can't sing, please come and give it a go. But it remains one of the biggest challenges, I think.
I think you really see people transform in the group as well when they've come in with this belief that I can't sing. No way, I don't even know why I'm here. Like, hey, like this is out of place and everything. But as the weeks go on, you see them, they change, like their posture opens out a bit, and they're getting into it, moving a bit more with the kind of with the beat and singing out. And then over time, the sound of the group from when it starts till when it's going, because my group ran for 1.5 years before lockdown, the sound change was phenomenal, and you just heard it all the time, just that little bit, that person just singing out that little bit more. And I think people take that confidence with them, that they're like, hey, I can do this thing that all my life I never thought I can do, and here I am every week singing my heart out. What else can I do in my life that I never thought I can do? And it really changes people.
That, totally. That's actually that's one of the phrases in a song that we wrote, that the Warblers wrote during lockdown. So we were involved in this fabulous writing project, which was an outreach project of the Edinburgh International Book Festival called Citizen. And we'd had one workshop. Musselburgh was one of their target areas. So we'd had one workshop with Ellie Tom, the writer who was working as part of that project. And then we carried on online. And we wrote one of the phrases, some of the work, into a song, which is on our website, called Singing is My Solace. And one of the verses in the song, if I can remember it, is always felt embarrassed singing in public, never even sang in church. Now I sing my heart out in the car. And it's just fabulous. It just really encapsulates that kind of, and this is a guy who went to church every week. Church was a big part of his life. And a lot of people sing in church and never sing anywhere else, but he didn't even sing in church. He was kind of, And then when you add in, so yes, there's the singing sessions, and that definition of singing for lung health kind of said that performing isn't a big part of singing for lung health whatsoever. Yet, typically as time goes on, the group is asked, will you come and sing at blah, blah, blah. And you kind of check out with folk. You don't want to put people on the spot. You don't want people to feel too nervous. And a couple of people have always stood back from performances, which is absolutely fine. And I've always emphasized this isn't what this group's here for. But if you'd like to, we can do this. And then the confidence that folk get, that boosts their confidence even more. So there's that kind of confidence that can just keep growing. If it's, within the supportive context of this group of people who they've got to know, a song leader who they've got to know and trust, and actually just knowing that actually there aren't any wrong notes. And we can just go for it. This feels good. It benefits me. It benefits my lungs, benefits my general well-being. It uplifts me. Singing together is a unifying thing. We're listening to each other. We're there with each other. And it's that sort of whole general well-being approach, with the reassurance that you just do as much as feels right for you, and you're kind of you're the expert on what works for you and your body and your breathing on any given day, and you need to kind of look after yourself in the group.
We've had it's lovely to hear about your experiences there, Cheyne. And we have had a few similar experiences with the Cheyne Gang. Again, we never put pressure on anyone to perform if they don't wish to, but it's been amazing to see almost what you call kind of the teamwork instinct kicks in, where people feel like they're part of this community, they want to celebrate it, and that's part of that is sharing the songs with an audience that wants to hear them, and sort of we've had your story just there reminded me of a workshop we did at the Community Education Centre in Leith, which was where the Leith group started. And the Leith group in general, as I said, we're one singing group of about 6 around the whole of Scotland. And in terms of membership, there's sort of about 10 to 15 members, so it's not a particularly large group. But we were singing as part of this open day for the Community Education Centre. They were interested in all of the groups that use the centre coming along and kind of sharing what they do with the local community. So it was a workshop, and then obviously kind of ended with a couple of songs that we all sang together. And it was for anyone. So it was for some people who, people were coming to the room who had no experience of living with a lung condition or living with breathlessness. And it was an interesting way to kind of give them some insight into people's conditions that people that were living with breathlessness day to day. So that was quite interesting. But we also, it was just at the end where we did this big sing along, and the folks who were in the group week to week very much were sort of helping other people join in on the parts, and kind of, and they all had their Cheyne Gang t-shirts on, and they were just really like so enthusiastic and so happy to be there and to be sharing this, and really proud of what had brought them together. And when you think about that experience of the condition that they live with compared with their previous experience of it being an isolating and kind of individual experience, it's just very inspiring to kind of see what singing can do for bringing people together in that way. So yeah.
And I think what you've touched on there as well, the benefits of singing for lung health aren't just about physical well-being. Yes, singing for lung health does hopefully bring some physical benefits in terms of breathing, reduced breathlessness, possibly in some people reduced hospitalization, reduced reliance on inhalers. But the three broad categories, and I'm going back to this consensus statement again now, which said that the three broad categories of benefits from singing for lung health were physical, psychosocial, and social. So it's the kind of the physical, the emotional, and the reduced isolation, the building of that community, the discussions that take place about other classes that people can get involved with, the sharing of resources. The thing that happens so strongly within my Singing for Lung Health groups, if somebody's not well, is that there is so much sort of concern and support and cards sent, and people developing, sharing phone numbers amongst each other, ringing each other up, checking how they are. There's a real sense of actually somebody's not well here, and we're looking out for them. So, that really strong sense of community, as well as sharing tips for managing breathlessness and dealing with medical professionals, whatever it might be.
I think that sense of community is something that's lived on through lockdown. I was so worried when the group stopped that peer support space would be gone, and what would that mean for people who are shielding and in real isolation there. But actually, you really saw the strength of those connections where people were really looking out for each other and doing that like themselves without that group facilitating it, like just keeping that sense of community alive.
Yes, lockdown brought a whole new element into the whole Singing for Lung Health world, didn't it? And we did keep our groups going online. And I was really fascinated when we did a bit of an evaluation to kind of, just to see if this was if the group had played any sort of different role in their lives to the role it usually plays. And interestingly, people did say that they still found it really, really useful in terms of helping their breathing, even though, so for anyone who doesn't know about online singing, you have to, when you're actually singing a song together, everybody has to be on mute because of the time lag. So the singers can hear the song leader and will be singing along with the song leader. The song leader can't hear any of the singers, which is rather tragic. And but it was the best thing we had. And so if we then sing around, I will have made a track beforehand with me singing both parts, and I can sing along with that and alternate between the two. And actually it's in some ways I think it helped people develop more confidence in their own voice, because they're actually singing on their own and listening to themselves, singing along and trying to pick out, say, one part of a round. But what people said in addition to all of that was that the actually having that contact with people still, where they could still see each other, moving along to a song, even though they couldn't hear each other. And of course we had some chat as well and some social time, and we did some of our warm-ups unmuted and checked in before and after each song and got feedback and all of that sort of stuff. But people also said that keeping the routine and the structure of their week had been really important when nearly everything else had gone. And keeping up those connections had been really important. And other people also said that one of the benefits of online sessions was that folk who would maybe have been unable to attend in-person sessions because of their health were actually able to join in. I've got a quote here from one person she'd been part of our Midlothian group right from the beginning, but had then latterly not been able to come very often because of her health. And she joined in a lot of the online sessions. And what she said was, normally I miss so many sessions because of my health, but now I can attend even if I'm having a bad day from the comfort of my own home. Sometimes the physical effort of getting there really takes it out of me. Now I can use my energy for the singing and really feel the benefit. So yeah, it was just really interesting adding in this whole other, I don't think anybody would choose to do online singing, but as a kind of, it's the best we've got at the moment. It actually served such an important purpose for our members during particularly the early stages of the pandemic, when many of them, I'm sure many of the Cheyne Gang members as well, were shielding. So they were very isolated and frightened.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We did a sort of range of approaches within the Cheyne Gang of Sophie and myself and the other leaders have been producing video resources that go on our website, which has been really interesting because the uptake of those has been much broader. We've seen much more traffic towards that than we would necessarily expect from just the members of the Cheyne Gang. So we're not entirely sure of the reasons for that, but it's quite encouraging to see that there are people using these resources, and we have partnered that up with kind of weekly and fortnightly kind of phone calls and check-ins. So within the Cheyne Gang team, we have some excellent kind of administrative organizer staff that will put their time into that kind of community building side of things. And definitely the Leith group that I told you about earlier, before lockdown, we hovered around the sort of 10 to 15 members. We've actually acquired a couple of members throughout lockdown because people have heard about it through their social networks or what have you, and their families, and sort of thought, oh, maybe I'll get involved in that.
And I've just found my notes here about a research study that looked at moving Singing for Lung Health online in response to the COVID-19 experience from a randomized controlled trial. And this was an article published in the BMJ in 2020. And they found that people reported enjoyment, improvements to their breathing and mood, and also benefited from the social aspects. There was a clear preference for face-to-face singing, but online singing still provided substantial health and well-being benefits. So that's certainly backed up at, I think what we've all been saying. And that it's Singing for Lung Health appears safe and enjoyable, both face-to-face and online. The barriers include digital access and digital literacy, which was huge. And depression and balance coordination appeared to show improvements. So yes, I spent a huge amount of time trying to get folk connected and to develop the confidence to come online. And we actually initially did one session on Zoom a week and one that I streamed from Zoom to YouTube live, so folk could watch that whenever. So it was a little bit easier to access. And I'm still, we were going to go back to in-person sessions early September, but because local rates were so high, we've kind of delayed that bit. So we're still hoping to go back relatively soon. But in the meantime, there's still a few people who I'm still trying to keep on saying, yes, I do want to come on, but they've just not quite managed it yet. So yes, for that older generation who just aren't used to technology, it's been a huge sort of leap of faith, really. And people are so delighted when they do make it and they can see people. And
Well, it's been amazing to hear about all your online work and how you're bringing in that creativity of connecting people. I'm wondering, as we're thinking about coming back to in-person groups, how it's going to look like for your respective Singing for Lung Health groups. Are there any practices from online that you're going to be bringing into your in-person groups?
That's a really good question. So we're starting back quite soon, actually, in a slightly reduced capacity with a couple of our groups to ensure that we can maintain safe distancing, good ventilation. We're reducing the length of time of the group as well, to kind of reduce the risk of infection, essentially, when it comes to COVID. And that's going to be quite a sort of adventure in itself. And I think there'll be, when I'm thinking about what to cover within those groups, I'll be covering the things that we would normally cover in any session. So when it comes to the sort of core ingredients that I include in any Singing for Lung Health session, Jane talked beautifully about the sort of physical work that we do with our bodies, understanding the voice as part of the body. And so beginning a lot of sessions with that kind of grounding process and the physical side. So when we're thinking about physical work with people living with lung conditions, we often think about releasing tension as much as possible. And to an extent, we do want singing as well as part of this, but the sort of safe experience of breathlessness. So enabling people to challenge themselves and to really sort of extend their breath. Sometimes they will experience breathlessness in our sessions, but because it's a safe space and they know that everyone else around them has similar experiences, they're potentially more sort of up for participating in that. So yeah, so physical work is part of what we're doing. Breath work, which sometimes is presented as, now we're going to do a breathing exercise, but sometimes we'll do it sort of what we refer to as by stealth. So either including it within the phrasing of certain songs that we're doing, or within kind of call and response format warm-ups, which is something that I do quite a lot, as kind of inviting people to imitate the sound that I've just made. And so sometimes I'll kind of work in the breath work through that. A couple of the video resources that I produced for the Cheyne Gang, one of them was to do with the sound of a train and kind of extending the length of the train sound for each bit. So I'll be using that in person, I think. And another one being around the dandelion clock, of just kind of using a imaginary dandelion just to kind of get that connection with the abdominal breathing. So rather than saying, and now feel it from your abdomen, da-da-da, thinking of it as quite a natural act of, if you were just going to blow all the fluff off that dandelion, what would you do? And it has the same physical effect. So sometimes with breath work, we use that kind of either call and response or visualization element, or something, or just sort of by stealth within the songs. Something else that we generally cover is kind of the cognitive side. So part of living with a lung condition can sometimes be around the kind of brain fog that people describe, which can happen as a result of it's to do with the way that the blood flow is kind of oxygenated, because if the gas exchange in your alveoli is challenged, then obviously that sort of stands to reason that you maybe will be having a slightly sort of lower, it's harder to get oxygen around the body, and that includes the brain. So there's kind of, sometimes people can feel a bit sluggish, or and that can come as well as just part of the sort of psychosocial experience as well. So sometimes cognitive things, so we'll introduce kind of little singing warm-ups in a way that you can use things like numbers, or you can use adding actions to songs that people already know, replacing words, and they can get quite silly and quite fun, and that's part of what we're doing as well. So laughter,
you're the
and fun
queen
is
of cognitive warm-ups, Caro. You're it's your speciality. I love your cognitive warm-ups.
I really think like but thank you. It's also, I mean, cognitive work is something that is generally looked at within music as a whole as well, and there's a lot of theory around if you do music from an early age, for example, or sing with children, they can it sort of increases the elasticity of the neural pathways, and it enables you to kind of just hook onto things and create. With a song, you've essentially got about 3 or 4 different ways of remembering the same thing, and it might be through the words, it might be through the tune, it might be through the feeling that the song creates. There's kind of all these different ways that your kind of psychology can hook onto it, and that's I'm sure you'll be covering singing with people living with dementia, for example, when people are struggling with memory, music can be one of the things that really kind of stays there. And I was in a lucky position as a child of being exposed to a lot of music, and I think that was part of why I quite enjoy cognitive warm-ups, because it was sort of part of my own neural development. So yes, the cognitive side is something that we kind of cover as well. Relaxation, ensuring that everything is a nice, safe and relaxing space for people to be in, that again is kind of, that's very much on the border of whether it's physical or mental. It's kind of the whole seeing it as a holistic thing, and that can be through, it can be through breathing, it can be through singing, the kind of the mood of the song that you choose, or the phrasing that it has, or through something like a verbal kind of a poem or something like this as well, which that's not something I've necessarily been drawn to myself so far, but it's something that I have noticed my colleagues doing more and more, especially during the lockdown side of things, where the musical side has been more of a challenge to make happen, and it's something that I'm keen to bring into my practice, so I'll be looking at that, and then of course the singing, so there will of course be songs, so I'm looking forward to hearing to bringing those together.
It's a really interesting question. I've just been sitting here thinking, and really interesting to hear your thoughts, Caro. I think there's a few things for me, and some of them have come from or have been informed by my work with the singing group for people with long COVID. So one of the things that we did there was, because we were focusing more on the inhale, so supporting people to sing one phrase and then inhale while the next phrase was going on, and then you come in on the third phrase. So I've started using a little bit more of that in my Singing for Lung Health group. And of course, when you're online and you're singing along to a track, then that's quite easy to do. But I'm wondering about doing a little bit of that as we go back, and actually, just really supporting people to allow space for the inhale, as well as that focus on the long and gradually extending the exhale. That's a really core part of singing for lung health. So yes, I'm wondering about, say, playing the odd track in my sessions. I've always been very resistant to using backing tracks, because I think they can detract from people actually hearing and being confident about the sound of their own voice. But they can also, I think, if it's a track of me or somebody else just singing the whole song that we can sing along to, that actually isn't dominant, so we can actually leave some more spaces. I'm thinking particularly, there's one song that we did online, which is a lovely grounding song, My Roots Go Down by Sarah Purtle. And if you leave out the kind of fourth phrase, my roots go down, down into the earth, my roots go down, down, and then you inhale and then you go again. So it's kind of just adapting things like that. And that's a lovely, it helps get that lovely grounding feel as well. You can visualize your roots going down. And it goes on to include lots of different trees and stuff. The other thing that I've started doing is sort of doing themed sessions. And we've done a theme of rivers, so songs about rivers. We're doing songs about singing, and it's just sort of creating a bit. It's adding a bit of extra interest, and then the poems I read are sort of on that theme. So I think I'll possibly carry on with that, and I invite people to suggest songs on that theme that they might like. Using the poems, I'll definitely carry on with that. That was a lockdown thing, but I really love it and people seem to really appreciate it. Some of my singers aren't going to feel confident coming back to in-person sessions, certainly right now. So I'm going to also need to Zoom our in-person sessions. I'm sure I'll get there. I'm sure we'll get there.
Yeah.
Another technical challenge. And the other thing that I think I've started bringing in more, during lockdown, I had some singing lessons myself, and which my background isn't as a singer, it's as a community worker, and I'm a trained social worker, and I got into singing through sort of radical song. So actually learning more about my own voice, and was going to these fabulous sort of online vocal workout sessions that Helen Porter runs, is a jazz singer based down in Cornwall. So I feel like I understand more my own voice and how that works. So bringing that more into my singing work feels quite exciting.
I don't know about for you both, how you find getting people to come along to your groups. Is there a kind of social prescription kind of model that your group is a part of, or how, because it's quite hard sometimes for people to know about these groups as something that could help them?
Yeah, we have a really strong relationship with the local pulmonary rehab physiotherapists, who have been really supportive of the Warblers right from the start. And we used to go along to their what they called their maintenance session after sort of 10 weeks of pulmonary rehab physio. There's a kind of what next session. And we used to be part of that. Because they've sort of had to shorten the time they have for that, we've not been able to do that recently. So we rely on them to kind of show people our video, to pass on our flyers. We also send out the flyers quite widely through practice nurses, GP practice managers, libraries, community centres, other third sector organisations. Yes, social prescribing, that's definitely on the wish list. I think I've had one person who said that her doctor had prescribed her to come to my singing group, and I was absolutely delighted and thought, yes, here we go. But there's not been another one since, and that was a few years ago. So I think we've got a long way to go in terms of social prescribing. It would be absolutely ideal. And some of the research has certainly shown that singing for lung health can not only have beneficial health impacts, it can also be a cost-effective way of supporting people to manage their long-term condition. So it totally makes sense. And I've gone along and done presentations to GPs, practice nurses, together with a couple of people from the group who can speak from their experience as participants as well, in terms of the benefits. And I think that's where the research really comes in as well, and why it's really important for us to be able to show that this is an evidence-based approach, because that's what medical professionals will look at and listen to. So I'm really looking forward to Scotland's Singing for Health network helping us in kind of knowing a bit more about the latest research that's out there. I don't always have as much time as I'd like to be able to sort of do another scan about what new studies are there coming up. We certainly have a section on our website that sort of links to a few of the sort of key research findings, but would really, really value the support of the academics with that. Yes, there's the research, there's the health professionals, and there's us as Singing for Lung Health practitioners. And I think there's a lot of ways that we can all work more closely together.
Yeah, that's definitely an aim of the network, is to, we've recognized then these gaps, that there's not enough communication between the different fields of research, medical practice, and music practice. So how do we facilitate these dialogues? How do we make medical practitioners know what we're doing and the research that says how beneficial it is? It's so interesting hearing like how you've managed to link in with these different health professionals, but that there's still space for kind of maybe more acknowledgement maybe from the health field. If you were to think about the future of singing for lung health in Scotland, what might that look like?
For me, it would be a clear model of singing on prescription. So actually, let's nail this. Let's actually make this a formal process. Let's get enough robust research evidence to convince medical practitioners that this is a good idea. So whatever it takes. We would also have a really strong Scotland-wide Singing for Lung Health network. So at the moment it's a little bit piecemeal. There's groups as well as the Cheyne Gang groups. I know there's the group in Ayr and a group in Paisley. I'm a little bit out of touch, and the St Andrews Voices group as well. I'm a little bit out of touch what other groups there are in Scotland at the moment. And we did have, pre-pandemic, we had a couple of sort of peer support sessions, which were lovely. Which is when I met you in real life, Sophie. Which is fab. And Caro and my paths have crossed on a number of occasions. But just really building that, I think, is so important, and to feel like we're all supporting each other, working together to build this, and looking at the areas of Scotland that don't currently have Singing for Lung Health groups. The model that was set up by the British Lung Foundation was a little bit, they gave us some seed funding, and then we were a little bit on our own to kind of sort out your own funding, set up an organization, or navigate your own pathway. So there's some challenges in that, and I hope that people have learned from that. And there's certainly discussions now, I think, within the British Lung Foundation about coming back on board a bit more with Singing for Lung Health. I'm not quite sure what that's going to look like, but let's hope it sort of leads to a bit more of a strategic approach, and kind of ongoing support, training, networking between us, and robust evaluation. I don't have a research background. I know the basics of evaluation, and I did a master's in applied social studies as part of my social work degree. So I kind of know how to do an evaluation, but we all need to be evaluating the same thing, needs to be sort of clearly worked out so that we can actually use that evidence to really promote Singing for Lung Health amongst medical practitioners. And I think we need to be a bit more closely integrated as an approach with pulmonary rehab and other aspects of healthcare. So that would be my wish list.
Yeah, I think I agree with everything on Jane's wish list. And I think, in particular, that kind of, I think both healthcare and the singing side, we need to take each other more seriously, I suppose, in some ways. And just to add to that, I've just got a couple of things to add. And one would be that obviously this is an ongoing need and an increasing need. So more and more people are living with lung conditions. We know the challenges around things like air pollution as well. We don't quite know what the long-term repercussions are of COVID. It's a growing area, sadly, but it's one that we need to kind of be prepared to deal with, and singing can be part of that. And I think that's very clear to us, and it's just kind of communicating that outwards. The other thing is the sort of building the professional routes for singers and musicians to come into this world, because singing and community singing can sometimes be something that people kind of fall into from all sorts of backgrounds, and that is part of its strength, that diversity within the sector, but it's also something where we need to be aware of ourselves as professionals and to kind of build the skill set that we need and to provide support for those coming up. So quite often, people might do a music degree, but what does that music degree really prepare them for? Does it prepare them to go and run a Singing for Lung Health session? Like, at the moment, not really, not straight away. So I suppose how do we kind of build those roots in? Because definitely as someone, so I don't have a music degree, but a lot of my peers do, and I suppose there's sort of that, how do we kind of build those connections so that people know that that's a possibility? I think that goes for the whole of Singing for Health, and not just Singing for Lung Health specifically, but to kind of build that awareness early on and to provide clear and agreed upon training routes. So as Jane was saying, that sort of if you have a network situation with other Singing for Lung Health practitioners, and you know about the training and support and the development route that is available for that as a profession and as something that we can do. I definitely have a sort of underlying belief that societally and culturally we expect a lot from our artists. Like there's a lot of things that come up, artist commissions, and I'm speaking as a more broad musician now, but things that come up where you're just expected to know how to engage with communities from different backgrounds to yourself, or you're expected to just be able to design a project and evaluate a project, and actually to do those things well, we really need to kind of advocate for that as a sector, and to say we need more support to do this, we need formal routes to have these skills, and it can't just be that you're expected to be able to do it straight off. Or quite often we're operating on shoestring budgets and not really getting sort of the support from funders and from organizations that we need. So I think there is part of me that says, as musicians and as singing practitioners, we need to take ourselves seriously and to kind of work together on this.
And I think if we're taking a social prescription model seriously, with that has to come funding for these groups as well. It's great to have people referred to them, but there just needs to be that extra step as well of really supporting the groups financially.
Yes, I mean, my groups are funded through, I apply for funding. We don't get any funding through our local health and social care. Interestingly.
Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think there'll be a really promising future for singing and health in Scotland. I think there's so many motivated people who are working so hard in this field to get it recognised, because there are so many impacts in people's lives. And before we finish, I know, Jane, you wanted to share a story from one of your group members to kind of voice some of these impacts.
Yes, so this is a story by a woman called Joan, and it's available on our website, and it also featured on the British Society of Lifestyle Medicine website. So this is what Joan said. My daughter advised me to start singing. She's a nurse, and she told me that singing was one of the best things I could do to improve my breathing. And she had heard that there was a Singing for Lung Health group meeting at Mecca in Musselburgh. So she phoned Jane, and I started coming back in March 2019. My first thought was, I can't sing. But I thought about it for a few weeks and then told myself, if it helps your breathing, Joan, give it a go. It was the best thing I ever did. You don't have to be a singer. I had lung cancer, and then I was diagnosed with COPD. I needed something to take my mind off things and to help my breathing. It has helped my breathing enormously. The exercises that we do at the beginning of each class really help to open up my lungs. Anything that makes singing easier also helps with your breathing. I notice the difference when I'm going around the house. Before, I used to struggle for breath when I was going upstairs. I used to have to stop, but now I can manage most of the time without stopping. After a singing class, I can go into the kitchen and do a bit more, like make a cup of tea or a sandwich. I feel uplifted and I know I'm breathing better. The hours immediately after Warblers, I feel I'm also using my inhaler less. Now, if I'm feeling breathless, I go to the Warblers videos on the website, and even if it's only for 5 minutes, it helps. It's great knowing that the videos are there if I need them. Singing to me works as well as using my inhaler, and it's more fun. Singing together with others with similar conditions has been great, especially during lockdown. You don't have to leave your home and go out in the cold, and you're still able to meet up with friends and sing together and have fun. Even though we're online, it doesn't inhibit us. We all have to mute when we sing a song together because of the time lag, but we can still see each other moving to the rhythm of the music, and we chat before and after each song. So in a way, it's ideal for those who aren't confident about the sound of their voice, as no one can hear them. The small group chats give us an opportunity to be open with each other. We all get a chance to say how we're feeling. It provides a structure to the week, and the Zoom sessions feel like we're inviting others into our own homes at a time when we're unable to do that in person. In many ways, I prefer meeting online as it decreases the risk of infection. Cheyne, our song leader, is always looking to broaden our horizons by adding new songs and exercises and meeting up with singers from Cambridge and the Forest of Dean online. There's no way we would be going down there. My daughter was right. I wouldn't be without the singing now. I never thought of myself as a singer, but using my lungs in this way has made such a difference to me.
Oh, wow. Thank you so much for sharing that. Oh, yeah, it just resonates so much with, just everything we've been talking about today.
People you know in your groups, absolutely. Sure. And it's, absolutely. Just putting it into context of the difference it makes on all those different levels, the physical level, the social interaction, the emotional well-being. Absolutely. Yeah. So thank you very much to Joan for sharing her story as well.
Absolutely. And we'll link that on the show notes so people can go and find it on the website as well. Thank you so much, Caro and Jane. It's been such a exciting conversation, really inspiring to talk to you both.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you.
Do join us next week for our 4th episode of this series, which is going to be looking at dementia inclusive singing. We'll be joined by Stephen Deasley from Luminate Scotland, researcher and practitioner Jane Bentley, and Musical Memories chairperson Sam Thompson. Thanks for listening. In the wee room, underneath the stairs, everybody's happy, everybody's there, and we're all back in bed in our main chair. In the wee room, underneath the stairs.
This podcast is produced by Scotland's Singing for Health Network, a project hosted at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland, funded by the Royal Society of Edinburgh, and in partnership with the University of Edinburgh. For more information on our activities, please visit our website. Details are in the show notes.